Welcome to Bear and Balance. I'm Jeff Burkus. Other side of the screen, Lester A. Wiltfong Jr. Lester, the Chicago Bears lost a heartbreaker, 27-24 to Skull Vikings. They dropped to 0-1 in the Ben Johnson era. But the good news is football's back in our life. How'd you take the game?
The game was fun for a minute, right? I mean, it started off great. Caleb was 10 for 10, right, to start the game. He had some fantastic plays, individual plays. Some of the throws he made were just, on a rope, looked good with his feet. And it's kind of all fell apart, right? I mean, it's like three phases. I mean, all three phases, including the head coach had some mistakes, what he talked about in his press conference. So it was a completely Bearsy way to lose an opening game. And we hope that it wouldn't happen anymore with Ben Johnson. But I guess we all got a reality check that first year head coaches are going to have some problems and new offenses are going to have some growing pains. And it's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows like we all really, really, really wanted. It's going to take a minute to get this guy, to get this team where it should be.
Yeah, I personally will not be besmirching Ben Johnson's name because, he is my guy, right? So I'm going to be probably a little biased towards Ben Johnson. I really liked a lot of what I saw out of him in the offseason and camp and even just kind of the mentality he had on the sidelines. I know this one got away from us. I think there was a lot of reasons. I hope we can get into them tonight. We're gonna have a lot to talk about. I wanted to just talk up top before we got into the category real quick because I didn't know where else to fit it in. But the Bears really suffered here from two defensive pass interference calls. There's another call I'm going to get to in a minute. The two defensive pass interference calls. One of them rewarded a bad underthrow by J.J. McCarthy. Nahshon Wright got flagged for it. It's a flag that always comes out. I'm not saying that was a bad call. I'm saying those calls are bad. Rewarding bad throws, and that was 8 yards underthrown. I mean, it was a terrible throw, and we reward that because the receiver's trying to come back to the ball. The corner doesn't look back. I hate that call, particularly when it's such a bad throw. I feel like the ref should be able to just keep that in the pocket and be like, you know what, that was a terrible throw. Like that was so far behind. We're not gonna mess with that. The other one was, and that led to points. And the other one was kind of a terrible throw by McCarthy. He was way off, and his receiver had slipped into Tyreek Stevenson, and they threw the flag on him. It both huge, but and then the next play, the Vikings scored a touchdown.
Yeah,
they would have probably punted. I mean, it would have been like 4th and 2, I think, from about midfield. And so, either way, like that's certainly you'd rather have 4th and 2 from midfield if you're the Bears than you would 1st and 10 from the 25 or whatever it was where they scored from. So two bad calls. And I don't think that in terms of pass interference, I don't think that there was a similar reverse in the game where it evened out here. Generally over the course of time, over the course of a year, bad calls even out. But here you had many bad calls. And again, we'll get to the third one that I'm very upset about. But those two in particular, one bad call and one call that does get made all the time. I just personally hate it. And I think that really did affect the complexion of the game.
I'm surprised, every year the league, they kind of goes over the rules. Teams kind of put things in to kind of have rules changes. I'm surprised this one, the underthrown ball rewarding the guy with a penalty. I'm surprised this has never come up because we see it's not just the Bears games. Obviously, we see it all across the league. A quarterback makes a bad throw, really underthrows the ball. The offensive player tries to work back towards, he runs into, there was contact, yeah, but it was initiated because of the bad throw. So terrible. Then the second one was just as ridiculous as, come on, seriously, the receiver falls. So of course they're going to have some contact. I will say this, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, pretty much on all those calls that went against the Bears, they were pretty much, yeah, that's a bad call.
They called it out.
Yeah, they called it out right at the spot. And who is this new rules analyst that they have on MNF? It was like,
I don't know.
Sure
they found him at the nerdery. I don't know where he came from.
Yeah, that's weird.
I didn't catch it completely in real time, but when they were reviewing the Hawkinson, play, the non-fumble,
yeah,
and they were asking about the punch, and what they were asking about is like, well, if he's holding the ball and he hasn't been touched yet, and they only punch the ball, is that a fumble, or is basically the football part of the body. And once you make contact with the football, which he's holding and he's down, does that make contact? That's what I think that was the question he's asking. And he answered like, that's a legal play for you to be able to do that. It's a punch, but it's not punching the person, it's the football. And I was like, yeah, dude, of course.
Yeah. It's called the peanut punch, for crying out loud.
Who are you talking to? These are Bears fans.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, that was such a bizarre rule guy. Like, no, that punch is okay. That's legal. It's like the dude, we know that's not the question. Anyway, all right, let's get into trench tribute here. Let's get into the trenches. Big guys up front. Who'd you have? Who you want to talk about to give trench tribute out of week 1?
You know, there were a couple guys I could have went with, but the last time we had a show together, I kind of took this guy to task. He got my cold bowl of porridge. So I got to represent Deo Odangbo.
There we go.
I was not expecting him to have a good game at all. He didn't really make much noise during camp or the OTAs. Preseason, he was kind of invisible. So I wasn't expecting anything. And he came out pretty hot. He had a pass defended. He had a sack, got a lot of good pressure. You know, he was going mostly against the backup tackle. So he should be getting this play, but hey, you play who you're in front of. You got to do your job. And I thought for week 1, Deo Odangbo looked like he's going to be a capable player for the Bears.
I love it. First name I wrote down, you know, he got credited with the sack. It was more of a pressure that seemed like he kind of tripped JJ up when he tried to flush the pocket. Maybe not the prettiest sack that you put on a highlight reel, but it counts because he is the one that made contact, I believe, with his feet, caused him to go down. You know, JJ doesn't make it back to the line of scrimmage. It's a sack. So I think it was a 2-yard loss on that one. You know, same with the Dexter play, right? Like Dexter trips him up. It's like a 1-yard loss for Dexter, counts as a sack, right? Counts. You know, the Javon Hargrave on the other side, right? Caleb Williams stepping out 4 yards out of behind the line of scrimmage. He's closest to the player. He gets credit for that sack. But I think I like that you're starting off with that because he did show up a little bit, and it's nice to see that the Bears are getting a little bit back from their investment there. I was going to go with the guy that I didn't know was a human person before he played in this football game last night, Tano Passano.
Your guess is as good as mine on the pronunciation.
He had a big sack, and it was a really nice move, and he came through and he finished this. Like, that was like the clean sack of the night, right? Like, that was the other two were kind of trip ups where he's trying to flush the pocket. Again, they count. But this was like a clean sack. You know, I was like, who is this guy? I don't know. And then they're like, hey, he just got promoted from the practice squad today. I was like, whoa, imagine the roller coaster that he's had, right? Like, he was just, hey, we're going to call you up. Hey, you're going to dress. Hey, you're going to be active. Hey, get in there, right? Like, get in there and get after the quarterback. Whoa, you know, that's quite the ride for the day. So I thought, you know, hat tip to that guy for, you know, making the most of your opportunity.
No, it was a nice game. I mean, he's a veteran. I mean, he's been around for a while. He spent some years with Dennis Allen. So, you know, I'm sure he's very comfortable in the scheme. I think he may have even won a ring with the Chiefs, you know, a few years back. So I think he's been around for a little. Yeah, I mean, he's been around a little bit. He's a vet. You know, he's one of those guys. I thought he'd make the 53-man roster just based on his past with Dennis Allen. But again, he was on the street when the Bears picked him up. Not a lot of interest in him at the time. Good on him. Like you said, you know, he called from the practice squad, and he made the most of his opportunity.
Well, you know, you can't get rid of Dom Rob on the active roster.
Jeez, so. Did he play? I know he played
10 snaps, I believe, is what I saw.
What are we doing here with
10 snaps, but I didn't see him on the field, if you know what I mean.
I did see him on a special teams play.
Yeah.
I saw someone run past him. That's the only time I noticed number 90 on the.
Yeah, I'm saying like maybe you spotted him, but I don't think you saw him on the field. Right? Didn't make an impact. All right, let's get to the social media portion. Sweet tweets. Let's start off with you and guy from my former hometown who went to my alma mater, Kurt Warner, had kind of an intriguing tweet out there. And I think it's worth time to kind of break this down. What do you say?
You know, I wasn't expecting this from a guy like Kurt Warner, you know, but he was impressed. So at Kurt 13 Warner just finished the Caleb Williams film and thought it was pretty darn good! And then he went ahead and graded them. And then the nice thing is he followed up with a tweet later and
Yeah.
he actually showed his work. He showed how he each play gets a plus, double plus. It's one of those things where you're like, okay, it's nice to kind of get a chance to see what a Hall of Fame quarterback had to say about him. And look, he's been critical of Caleb in the past. So the fact that he kind of came out week one and Ben Johnson, when Bears fans are for the most part are like, I mean, there are some in the fan base ready to just turn the page. He's a bust. Let's go. We're done with it. But here's a guy, Kurt Warner. He knows a thing or two about quarterback play. He is actually a really good follow on Twitter. He breaks things down quite a bit. He has a YouTube page, also really good content on there. So it's kind of nice to see that he has that perspective, whereas others do not.
Yeah, your buddy Papa Scarps has been telling me for a long time Kurt Warner is the best in the game. What I liked about this one, you are correct. He did fall. He showed his scores. He said, "Here's how many plays that I graded Caleb with a double plus, with a single plus, with a zero," and he explained what those were. And in the first half and the second half breakdown. First half's obviously better than the second half, and then he followed up with his notebook and his notes. And I think that it's worth going on and looking. And I think it's actually really good if you take the grading scale that he puts out there, go through the game film, and try to if you have access to the all 22, that's ideal, and go through and try to work your way. If you kind of like this stuff, try to work your way through and say, what did he do here? Did he do something that was kind of extraordinary? Speaking of Caleb, did he do something kind of extraordinary? Did he make a big mistake? Did he miss something but still made a play out of it? Those were the kind of the different pluses and minuses in his grading scale, and kind of see if you match up with what Kurt Warner has. And
Yeah.
the other piece that I like about it is that this is much closer to what a team is going to do. A team's going to go through, they're going to go through play by play. They're going to grade on something similar. The scale like this is, I think, totally normal. Teams might vary in exactly how they do it, pluses, minuses, blah, blah, blah. But they're going to have a very considered grading system that they're going to be consistent with throughout the year, so that quarterbacks are going to know, players are going to know how they're doing on a game-to-game basis. It's not distilled down into one nice little pretty number, right? And the service out there that does that, I think, does a disservice to football discourse. And the other thing that Kurt Warner said that I think is really important is that he said the degree of difficulty that Caleb was operating with was much higher than what JJ McCarthy was operating under. And so, again, like if you were going to put scale on this sort of thing, like it's almost like, gymnastics scoring or swimming, diving scoring or something. Like there's a degree of difficulty on some of these throws, some of these plays. And if you execute the hard ones well, that is kind of worth more points than it is to run more simple stuff that can get figured out and maybe has a ceiling on it. So this stuff's really complicated. And this is part of why I get so frustrated with trying to distill things down to a single score, and then trying to compare that across the league. Like I understand the attractiveness of that concept, that idea. I just don't think it works very well, particularly with football, particularly with quarterback play. Like the most complex position inside of the most complex sport does not really lend itself to being distilled down to a single number. And so I love that Kurt did this, and I love that you wanted to highlight it.
Yeah, that's like I said, the key for me is that he followed up and showed his work. It's like when I'm doing sack watch, that's kind of what I pride myself on. I try and show my work as much as possible. If you're going to break things down, you got to kind of explain what you're doing there. When I have graded, offensive line in the past, again, I'm always willing to show my work. It's a simple concept. Quentin Crisco does a great job when he grades the O-line as well. He always puts his work out there for everyone. So there are places you can find where it's a little bit more in depth as far as just throwing out a grade and saying this is what it was. And those are kind of who I kind of go towards, because I want to know more. I want to know why behind it. And sometimes if they don't give me a reason, then why am I looking at what you're doing if you can't explain why you did what you did?
Go back to your math teacher. You got to show your work. I try to do that on all my stats articles. I try to show my work with you guys, so you see, even though most of you guys don't care, you just want to skip to the answers. But I think it's important that you can replicate it if you're interested, right? That stuff's important to me. All right. So for mine, I went with Jeff Schwartz. We love Jeff Schwartz here, even though he spells his name with a G. It says, "Yo, NFL, we have to do a better job on this snatch, trap, splash holding calls. It's just not holding. This is one of the cleaner splash technique executions. If you don't see the entire block, you shouldn't flag the end result. It's bad. Please stop." So what he's talking about, this is obviously the Darnell Wright penalty. This was the turning point of the game, Lester. And I hate that I'm saying that about a yellow flag on the field. But here's the thing. I know it as a snatch trap technique. He calls it a splash technique. Whatever. I'm sure it has 4 other names too. But
every coach got something different.
Essentially, if you're the offensive lineman and you've got a defensive lineman with both hands that are extending into you, and you smack them down, like, because you're trying to disengage that and then re-engage it because you want to get the defender and the shoulder pads, right? And he wants to extend you so that he can move you around and get past you, right? So the technique is for the offensive lineman to come down and get those arms off of you. And Darnell Wright is a big dude, right? I mean, how big is this guy? 350 plus, right? Like, I mean, I don't know if it's 350. He's a big dude though, right? And very strong. So he's coming down, and that defensive lineman isn't ready for it. And that his arms get smacked to the point where the momentum takes him to the ground. So he just hits his arms and he falls to the ground. It's a perfect execution of that block technique, right? The head referee who is looking at Caleb sees this out of the corner, out of his periphery, right? And look, I'm not as old as that referee. I don't know how old he is. My eyes aren't getting any better the longer I am around here. But like, I'm having a hard time thinking that I know exactly what just happened out of my periphery if I'm facing this way. But he sees it. He looks over and he sees the end result, which is the defender on the ground and Darnell Wright kind of going down and kind of giving him a shove. Totally legal. Like, there's nothing wrong with any piece of this. And he throws the flag. The bigger problem here is that Caleb Williams completes a pass to DeAndre Swift, makes a nice run. That's first down at the 12. They are in the red zone. They're up 17-6 at this point. They're locked into 3 points here and maybe 7. This is potentially the ball game. This is potentially putting them away. Fine. This was just after that pick 6. And this penalty changed the course of the game because it backed them up. They had more mistakes. Cairo Santos misses a 50-yard field goal. Minnesota takes over at midfield. Like, it is a cascade of bad because of one terrible call.
Yeah, that call was bad. Like, we talked about a few. Look, you never want to blame it on the refs. You never want to say that's the reason. Look, I talk about it top. This is a 3-phase failure on the Bears. They had mistakes at every level. The coaches had some mistakes as well. But the refs were also had some, and this was a terrible, terrible call. Buck and Aikman called it out. A lot of the O-line parts of social media, they called it out. And look, it's always crazy because O-line Twitter, right? A guy like Schwartz, Brandon Thorne, all these guys that Olin Kreutz, they are always breaking down some of these ridiculous calls. And then you always get the casual fans in there. That was clearly a hold. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. It's just because they see the jersey get a little like this, or they see a little grab here. Like, that's okay. You're allowed to grab. You just can't hold. You know what I mean? So there's a difference in the two. So terrible, terrible call. Like you said, it definitely took points off the board possibly there because, it just kind of, look, it's a momentum game, right? Turning points happen in the NFL. And that was a big one for the Bears.
I'm still not over it. That one really bothers me.
I can tell. You're really animated there. This one.
Well, I mean, like, one, it was perfect. He got
technique.
Penalized for making a great block. Like, it's like, which happens. There has been times where I've seen it just in offensive linemen in general, but I've seen Bears offensive linemen make great blocks, and because the guy gets beat so bad, he somehow draws a flag. And this one was such a pivotal point and would have been so. I think the game is won at that. Like, that is how. Yes, they made a bunch of mistakes. The Bears made a bunch of mistakes here, but the Bears are going to get this game into the fourth quarter and put on additional points here. I mean, to me, the game's essentially over if that call's not made.
If they
So
would have scored 7, I think it would have been
it's
done.
7 for sure, but even
Yeah,
the 3 puts you up 2 scores. I mean,
yeah,
it's just a different ball game.
yeah,
And I think you feel a lot better about, again, it's momentum. I think you feel about a lot better about where you're at with everything, and then you kick the ball off. You wouldn't
yeah.
hand the ball to him at midfield, And again, we'll get to Cairo in a minute here, but all right, caught up in a numbers game. Let's talk about your stat of the week. What'd you come up with?
My number is the number 3. And did you realize the Bears did not allow a single third down conversion through 3 quarters? Vikes were
Sure
over.
felt like it.
Vikes were over. But then in the fourth quarter, things changed. Obviously, the Vikings converted 3 out of 4. Obviously, that really led to the big comeback there. They of course they outscored the Bears 21-7, 169 yards in that fourth to Chicago 63. So, it was going good. For the most part, as Bears fans, even when it got a little close there, the Bears still had a pretty good hand of the game. They were up 2 scores, and then it just kind of just all fell apart. And stopping them at third down. I mean, I'm not sure the last time I remember the Bears holding a team, without a conversion through 3 quarters. The fact that it just kind of fell apart there. I don't know if the defense got tired. I don't know what I mean, the Vikings are a pretty good football team.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they made some adjustments there, but it was just rough that they could not get a stop there in the fourth.
Well, I mean, that happens. The offense wasn't doing their part in terms of trying to chunk some clock off, right? I mean, that was part of it. They couldn't run the ball. They couldn't take any time off the clock. So, I mean, the phases play hand in hand, and when the offense can't do anything but 3 and out in the fourth quarter, you're keeping that defense on the field, and they're wearing down. You also had 3 starters missing. We haven't mentioned that yet. There was 2 guys in the secondary gone, and TJ Edwards wasn't available for this game. And your best player, Jalen Johnson's your best player. Kyler Gordon right there, right? I mean, so you missed a lot of talent on that team, so you're counting on backups. It's also the first week of the year. And so even though you think you might be ready from conditioning standpoint or remembering like how to gauge your stamina and your body, like it happens. Right? You see guys cramp up all the time. Nashon Wright had the calf cramp. You see that all the time in September football. It's just, it is what it is. I think more than anything, we should be encouraged by what the Bears defense showed against, a Kevin O'Connell offense, but it didn't finish, right? So I think a lot of people are going to focus on that. For me, my stat is 29%. This was the percentage of off-target throws from Caleb Williams. It comes out to 10 out of 34 passes. He had 35 attempts, but that number, which is that's the only number I saw, was 29%, and 10 out of 34, checks into that. So I think there must have been a throwaway, or maybe a batted ball or something that they're just not counting. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly. I didn't see what each throw was rated as. But that's the rate that they that's the stat. Whoever keeps that stat, that's what they said. Tweeted out by a few people, including Courtney Cronin. And that's a bad number, and it sure felt like that, right?
Yeah.
And you had the early, and we'll get into Caleb's stats, but you had the early 10 for 10, and then you had a lot of inaccuracies throughout the game. I think we can get into it a little bit, but I think for the most part, what the inaccurate off-target rate, they're non-competitive throws. So it's, you're not giving your guy a chance. You're not giving, well, I mean, I suppose you could be throwing a pick with an off-target rate too. But they're just, you're not giving your guy a shot. And I in my very amateur quarterback view, I can throw a football okay. We've had this conversation a few times. I think that his feet weren't matching where he was throwing. He wasn't pointing his foot. Well, that's very basic. These professional quarterbacks can get away with a lot, right? Like they can throw off platform, they can jump in the air, and they can hit an accurate pass. Like they can do crazy stuff. But in general, for most of us mortals, you basically point your foot where you want the ball to go. And if you're pointing your foot here, but you're trying to throw it over here, it tends to be a little less accurate, and you can really spray the ball. And that, to me, that's what I saw. He wasn't really setting And he is so good when he does that, when he's able to put his mechanics, beautiful mechanics, right? But when he's off, that can any quarterback that can spray the ball. And so he talked about losing focus. He talked about just not being, he said something about not being focused for a minute. And I think that's really showed in this number.
Yeah, I mean, you want to roll right into the Caleb corner here? I mean, we already got Caleb on the mind here. I mean, it just was rough. I mean, he just, like I said, 10 for 10 to start, right? And then, he finished 11 of his final 25 passes. So it was not a very good finish. He looked bad. He looked off target. Look, the Vikings have a good defense and they moved them off a spot quite a bit. And you talk about how, when you get off your spot, that's when the inaccurate passes happen. We saw him miss, wide open touchdown, DJ Moore. I mean, wide open, right? I don't know what he saw there. I've seen some people mention he's seeing ghosts because of the 68 sacks last year. That could be part of it, right? Part of it could just be that I talked about this in the chat room. Ben Johnson had to break him down, right? He gave him so much stuff this offseason. He talked about it. Caleb talked about it. And not just Caleb, the whole offense. He put a lot on their plate, right? He's breaking these guys down, breaking Caleb down in order to build them back up. So, we don't want to see these growing pains, but they're there. I was talking about my guy Scarbs. He mentioned, I forget who had this, was Bill Walsh or Bill Parcells, said, you don't know what quarterback is until I think, 25, 26 starts out, right? Caleb's in start number 18. So, we should know who Caleb is around mid-season. The nice thing about this year, the Bears have that early bye, so they'll have 4 weeks to play. They'll have a bye. Ben Johnson now can kind of go back to the lab and say, hey, this is who we are. This is our identity as a team, which he said he hasn't figured out yet. So it's going to revolve around Caleb somehow, some way. I just hope that, again, my trust is in Ben. I'm with you. My trust is in Ben Johnson getting this team figured out. Whether that's with Caleb or not, I mean, I trust what Ben Johnson's going to do.
Yeah, and this is not to excuse anything, and I don't want it to come off like that. But I do think we have to remember that this is a young quarterback, and a couple of his draft class contemporaries were in college football for 5 years, and Caleb was in college football for 3 years, right? And so Jaden Daniels comes in and he's flying high. He was in college for 5 years, right? He got a lot of time on task. He got a lot of reps, right? And, he had to learn, he transferred and had to kind of find his way and learn different systems. Like, good for him, right? Like, I'm happy that he's finding success in the NFL. Not really that happy, but good for him, right? Yeah. And there, Penix he was in the league for 5 years. I don't know how Penix did, but Drake May didn't have a great day on Sunday, and he was like Caleb. He's a younger guy. JJ McCarthy didn't do much. Obviously, he was hurt last year, so he's had his first start. But he didn't have a lot put on him, and then he obviously had a great finish. He had that great fourth quarter. So these guys are young. They're learning. They do need the time on task. I think what's frustrating for a lot of people is you guys said that this guy was the man. Like, he was going to come in and just be great right away. We all would have loved it if he would have come in and been Justin Herbert and had instant success. It didn't happen, right? And didn't happen because of last year's staff and probably 9 other reasons. And, now you've got, Ben Johnson, who should have been here last year, but wasn't. Yeah. So he's probably has to wind back some things that were bad from the previous regime. And honestly, probably some bad college instincts that follow some of these guys that are so talented that they can get away with stuff, right? Let's just run through the stats real quick. He was 21 to 35, 210 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. He took 2 sacks for 12 yards. One of the sacks was stepping out of bounds 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage. We hate that more than anything in the world. 86.6 rating, which is pedestrian. Yeah. He did run 6 times for 58 yards and a touchdown, almost a second touchdown, which then of course led to the passing touchdown of Roma Dunze. He looked fast. Like, I think, he's done that in the past, but I think he looked maybe just a step faster. And so that's going to be interesting to see if he's going to use the wheels a little bit more this year. I'm not sure about that. The one major concern I have is the gray T-shirt underneath the jersey. What in the world are we doing, Caleb? Like, I mean, for a guy that's so into fashion, uh, that didn't work for me. I don't know. Hopefully, he trashes that. That's a weird look. That looked high school kid. That nothing made sense with that one for me.
The NFL has a fashion police. Like they have a guy that
Yeah, they have
actually
rules.
watches. So I'm curious if he gets fined for that.
I think he'll get fined.
Because yeah, I'm with you. I don't understand the look. I mean, he had the socks down in preseason, which I'm like, okay, I'm not sure what's going on here. Did he forget? Then I see him this week one, and he's these guys are all individuals. They all want to kind of be flashy and do their thing. But I didn't get the gray. Maybe if it was the white, or if it was navy, or maybe even orange, maybe. But the gray, I didn't get the gray.
I just don't understand. Like, people were worn like, like a full layer underneath, like a mock turtleneck or something like that. Like, I mean, you've seen a lot of different stuff. You've seen some guys like wear hoodies underneath their, that doesn't make any sense to me, but like just this like T-shirt, gray T-shirt. It was like coming
floppy,
out the bottom.
yeah. Reminded me of the Allen Robinson era when he had that floppy, baggy, long sleeve shirt. Yeah, this is now officially we're aging ourselves by being you gotta dress right.
It looked terrible. So I think, if you just like, hey, you know what, like just like football players, not quite as bad as baseball players, but football players can be a little superstitious.
Yeah.
And so, it might be one of those like, hey, you know what? That was a bad game. Let's get rid of this bad juju, get it out of here, and not do that again. Right. Like that's my appeal to Caleb. I think overall, rewatching the game, reading some stuff, breaking some things down, I think I understand a little bit more that, to me, there was a lot of open receivers that he turned down. And so I think that's something that he's gonna hear about in the film room. I also think that there was maybe a little more pressure in his face than I kind of thought on the first run through. And I think that overall he seemed like he got out of rhythm, and he got young quarterback feet. And I want him to be beyond that. And maybe the time on task just isn't quite there enough for him to be able to lock in and get rid of that. And, he was a little jumpy, and, hat tip to Brian Flores, who got talked about more than any other coordinator you will ever hear on a national broadcast. They brought him up and showed him so often, right? Because he is so well respected. So there's a little bit of like, okay, maybe we do need to take a half step back and say, this was a 14-win team last year. This is a really good, creative, aggressive defensive coordinator. And even though Caleb handled these guys pretty well last year, let's tip your cap a little bit to him getting after Caleb and confusing him. And Caleb still didn't turn over the ball.
Yeah. I mean, the game script itself is, I think, why Bears fans are so upset. Because if you just look at the scores, the numbers, hey man, they took they were right there with a team that was a 14-win team last year. They're a much more very well coached team, very talented team. I expected it to be a close game. I thought the Bears were going to pull it out. I just thought they had a little bit extra. I thought the being at home, I thought they would have something. JJ McCarthy did not look very good for most of the game, and all of a sudden he got hot at the end. I thought they would be able to pull it out, but the game script, the way it looked early, we're just like, oh yeah, the Bears are going to be. They finally got it figured out, and then kind of just things kind of fell apart. Like I said, they bared it up. We hope that was out of the system, but I guess there's still a little bit of that flusy stink on this team that they got to kind of shake out of their system.
Yeah, hopefully that's the one and only that we have to deal with this year.
Yeah.
All right, hey, we're gonna send it to a break, but before we get there, let's just got a little message from our friends at DraftKings.
Our friends at DraftKings, it is your season, your shot. The NFL season is rolling along, and every touchdown can bring you closer to a payout with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. From first touchdown score to anytime touchdown props, or the thrill of live in-game betting, every snap is loaded with opportunity. Look, the Bears, they got the Lions this week, right? It's a short week for them. The Lions are short week for the Bears. The Lions did not look like a very good team, right? They got kind of smacked around by the Packers. Not very good offense, not very good defense. So last I saw, I think the line was Bears were underdogs by 4.5. It might be something you want to look at, because I think the Bears may bounce back. The Lions may be who they are now. We'll see what happens there. But new customers, this one's for you. Bet just $5 and you get $200 in bonus bets instantly, plus score over 200 points off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So you download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code Gridiron Pro. That is Gridiron Pro to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you place your first $5 bet, plus over $200 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV in partnership with DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Fees may apply in Illinois, void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. See sportsbook.draftkings.com/promos. NFL Sunday Ticket offer for new subscribers only and auto renews until canceled. Digital games and commercial use excluded. Restrictions apply. Additional Sunday Tickets terms at youtube.com/go/NFL Sunday Ticket/terms. Limited time offer. Let's go to the real break now.
Love it. All right. See you back on the other side. Three Bears. See you then. All right, Lester, let's talk about the Three Bears. Hot bowl of porridge, cold bowl of porridge, and just right. Who'd you have for the hot?
How was tough this week? Like I said, the Bears started off good. It all kind of fell apart. So I'm going to go DJ Moore.
Okay.
When I want to watch back the film, I saw him running some nice routes. I saw him open probably a few times where he should have been hit. I talked about the touchdown that he was missed on early. There were a few other plays where he was just open and he was missed. He had 3 runs, 8 yards, 3 catches, 68 yards, but he got obliterated at the end of the game. He was down in the field for a long time. I thought something was serious here. I'm assuming they checked him for a concussion because he was kind of wobbly for a while. He looked like something was going on there. Left the game, and then he's back in the game a few plays later. And then today at the press conference, Ben Johnson said no injuries from the game. He got destroyed. I mean, he was hit. He was down hard, popped up. You know, that shows toughness from DJ. Obviously, he's playing some tailback now for the team. He's a team guy. He had a bad rep last year. Last year was not the best year for DJ Moore. He had some problems coming off the huge contract. He didn't have his season go like he had hoped. But so far from one game, I got to give it to DJ Moore. That was a gutsy performance coming back in there.
I thought he broke his arm.
Yes.
So, you know, I was like, oh no, Luther Burden, you better be ready. So yeah, the great call there. I got to call out Nahshon Wright because I didn't really expect that much, particularly against, you know, maybe being up against, you know, the one of the best wide receivers in the league from time to time. And he got a pick 6, man. And he was on the practice squad for the Vikings last year, right? Like that's what they kept saying. And to get a pick 6 against the team that you were just on, like, I don't know. That's pretty cool. That's revenge game right there. Right. And so I think you gotta tip your cap to that. That was pretty cool. Also, I wanted to mention Devin Duvernay because he didn't have a very good year last year in Jacksonville. That's what our friend Taylor Dahl says. Like, he wasn't really very good last year in Jacksonville, but I thought he looked like a professional return guy, right? Like, you know, not all the returns were great, but he had a little juice on a few, and I thought that overall he looked pretty good. And so I wasn't necessarily expecting anything, and I thought, I think the returns are going to be fine. As a gunner, not great, which is interesting because he probably should be pretty good at that. But he didn't look like he definitely didn't break down and make a tackle on one of the punts, which I think we're gonna get to in here in a second. Yeah. But overall, I think in the return game, I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I thought he had a nice game. He had a couple bobbles, a couple double catches, something they call it. But the fact that he has, like I said, he looks like a professional returner. You know, the Bears not always had that. I mean, the Bears have really struggled with that. That's kind of why they paid him what they paid him. They want to have a guy that can come in, they trust, who can do it. He's returned kicks, he's returned punts. You know, he's a guy that I don't think that having him back there, the Bears won't have to worry about, you know, that happening with the bobbles or the fumbles or things like that. So he's a pro. It's good to see him back there. It's a short-term deal. It's probably going to be his only year in Chicago. Next year, I'm sure they'll have another guy doing the gig, probably. Maybe Luther Burden. We kind of saw him get a chance to return a kick. We'll see kind of how the roster shakes out, but it's nice having a guy back there that can do it. And then with Wright, kind of a weird career for him. Like I said, he was on the Vikings practice squad last year, had some time in Dallas working with Bears DB coach Al Harris. He has some starts in the league early on in his career, so I wasn't expecting much of him when the Bears picked him up, prior to the offseason, but then he was running with the ones, filling in for Jalen Johnson. I'm like, okay, maybe he's got something. He looked kind of rough in preseason. Kind of have to see what happens here with him. But yeah, he looked pretty good. Overall, like I said, the Bears are down so many defensive backs. Someone had to step and make a play, and he stepped up and made a play.
I picked 6. We got to call you out. That's my favorite play in football. All right, let's flip it around. Cold bowl porridge. Where do you want to go here?
I'm going back to the O-line. I'm going back to the trenches. Okay. Big trade for the Bears, Jonah Jackson. He was pretty bad. I mean, his run blocking, his pass blocking, really nothing he did really stood out. And not only did the Bears trade for him, it was just a day 3 pick, no big deal. But they gave him new paper, so they signed him to an extension. I hope this is not the Jonah Jackson the Bears fans are going to get here for the next few years. Kind of reminds you of a Nate Davis situation. Kind of just was, they bring him in, high hopes, and he was bad. So hopefully it's just a one-game jitter thing for Jonah Jackson, because he did not look good. But look, to be fair, though, the Vikings, you already mentioned Hargraves, Jonathan Allen. That's a pretty good defensive line there. So you hope maybe when he faces a little lesser competition, he kind of gets his feet under him. But yeah, Jonah Jackson, got to call him out. Cold bowl.
Yeah, and they're, again, smart D-line, good, talented D-lineman. They were giving Joe Thuney, everything that Joe Thuney needed to could handle as well. Joe Thuney was up to the task, but it's a strength of their team for sure. For me, I'm going to go the guys with legs that we count on, Cairo Santos and Torrey Taylor. Let's take them one at a time. Cairo Santos missing the 50-yard field goal, sneaking in the field goal that he did make, which, you made it, so whatever. But, accuracy issues from him, they're not – you're a little nervous, and then that leg strength just isn't there, right? So you're worried about longer field goals, and you're watching across the league where these guys, and in this game, the Vikings kicker kicked a 59-yarder. Pat McAfee was talking about the K-ball rule change, and obviously he's a former punter, so he is thinking about it from that perspective too. But the punters and the kickers are now able to work the footballs much longer, and so that they can get more yardage off of their kicks because they're able to break them in a little bit more. And I was like, okay, well, maybe Cairo will benefit from that. But the whole league is benefiting from that. As you're seeing these guys being able to boom high 50-yarder, 60-yard field goals, and Cairo's still just behind, right? And so you've got a guy who's kind of expensive relative to kickers, and he's not a top half of the league kicker. I know we liked his accuracy, but it's just he doesn't have the big leg, and it was sort of a perfect storm of terrible where you needed him to kick the ball out of the back of the end zone. Everybody's gonna say kick it out of bounds, and yes, in hindsight, that's absolutely true. Just kick it out of bounds, take the penalty. But you need your kicker to be able to kick the ball out of the back of the end zone when you can, because all of these guys across the league can do it. When they're kicking off, just boom it out of the back of the end zone. I don't have stats in front of me to back this up. Just like watching football, though, the kickers in the NFL can kick off the ball through the back of the end zone and not have a return. He needed to do that. That was what was needed in that moment, and he got it 6-7 yards deep in the end zone.
Yeah.
So it became a real problem. I'll talk about Torrey Taylor real quick. I rewatched the game. I paid attention to the punts because, I thought this is a terrible game. The Puntalytics guys, having a pretty bad score. One because he got a punt blocked. And a lot of it's because of the returns. And so generally when you have a big return, it's either, you line drived it, you outkicked your coverage, or basically you didn't have any hang time on it. You gave a guy a free lane. Your coverage it just isn't getting down there or breaking down and being able to make the tackle, or a combination of those two things. And it was kind of all of those things that happened. Like there was one just line drive punt, and then there was one where there was pressure into Taylor, and it impacted how he got the ball off. And so that was a bad punt. And then he had the one blocked, right? So those are, I think there was 3 that I would put on Taylor. And then there were several where the Gunners just aren't winning.
Yeah.
They just like, a lot of times you'll see one of the Gunners on a punt team running away from the guys that are supposed to block them, if not both. And you just didn't see that from the Bears. Like the Vikings guys had the Bears Gunners blocked pretty well every single time. And so it's the Gunners weren't making any plays. Like the Gunners weren't making tackles. It was other guys on the punt coverage team. And that's a problem. We talked about it in the preseason, and it's rearing its head here. I'm not worried about Taylor in terms of being able to recapture what he was really good at open field punting last year. Like this to me seems like a one-off. The pressure was in his face. Maybe he needs to speed up his process a little bit. I think that can get fixed, but they need to find some Gunners, and they were mixing and matching them. So there's something that, Richard Hightower is going to have to figure out this week, because that's unacceptable.
You mentioned Richard Hightower, the one coach the Bears retained, right? So you would think that, he would have this special teams unit playing pretty damn good. I mean, a lot of these guys were here last year. He had a chance. They brought back some of their guys. Cairo Santos, look, he's never had a big boot. I think he was 8 of 9 last year, plus 50 yards, which is a really good percentage. But those are like 52, 53, nothing really long. Like he hit a big one in preseason, which no one expected him to hit. But yeah, like you said, these days, kickers can just hit it. I mean, when it comes to the Bears and they're outside a 50-yard field goal, we're not sure. I'm sure the coaches aren't sure. When it came down to that one having to kick it out of the end zone, look, they moved up the kickoff spot. I mean, they wanted to get rid of kickoffs, and they brought in the new kicking rule where they have all the dynamic, kick returns. Now it's different. So they wanted to have it back in the game, but they still kept the ball where it is. A professional kicker should be able to knock it out of the end zone when he has to. Cairo just didn't have the leg, and Ben talked about it. He was supposed to kick it out, So, I mean, if that was your plan, I wonder if Richard Hightower said, hey, man, he can't do it. Like, I mean, at some point, you would have thought this would have come up during the camp, during the prep for the game, or some point in July, maybe, where they realized you can't do this. Maybe he did it all in practice. Maybe that's something, okay, he can do it when he has to. He didn't do it last night, and that really hurt the Bears.
Well, there's really a focus on trying to land it in the landing zone this year, because they made it an additional penalty if you kick it in the end zone. Yeah. And so I think there's maybe like the focus was on like, hey, get it in this landing zone and covering the kicks landing in the landing zone. And then here he's focusing on that. And then it's like, hey man, we need you to kick it out of the back of the end zone. And he's like, okay. Right. I mean, he does his best, but he doesn't have the leg for it. So I think it really showed up at the worst time and cost the Bears an opportunity, right? Like that's 40 seconds that you didn't have. So it was rough. All right. Just right, Bull. Where do you want to go?
I'm going to go with Joe Thuney. I mean, I talked about the O-line a couple times now. I thought he was fine. I mean, he nothing huge, nothing like, oh my God, what a great block. Nothing that really, really, really stood out, but nice professional football. There were some times when I kind of was on, doing a good job picking up stunts. When I watch the Bears O-line, the one guy where I'm like, man, what happened on this play? I was having a discussion earlier today. There was something happened where the line did a split cover. 3 guys went one way, 2 guys went one way, and there was an A gap that kind of was untouched. And I'm like, well, I know it's not Thuney, because I just know he's a pro. He's an all-pro. I'm not worried about that guy there. He's going to be fine. So I just want to call him out. I mean, the Bears traded for him for a reason. He's the guy to come in, and I'm not sure how much he helped Braxton Jones. But Braxton Jones wasn't awful this week. I mean, he's been rough during camp and during preseason. I figured once they got Thuney next to him, that kind of maybe he would settle down a little bit. And week 1, that left side wasn't that big of a problem, and mostly it's because of Joe Thuney.
For me, I want to stick on the O-line as well. So I agree with you on Tooney. It's stabilizing force. I think is important, but I think that Darnell Wright, I think he looked really good.
He
And
did.
so I think if you got Tooney, that can maintain his level of play. And again, this is a tough assignment for the Bears offensive line, especially the interior guys. But if Tooney can be the stabilizing force and continue his high level of play, and Darnell Wright can continue to ascend, you have two legitimate pieces there. You hope that the other guys, I mean, Dahlman, it's tough. It's tough to analyze centers a lot, particularly early on. If you don't, if things are kind of discombobulated, centers generally are there to lose gracefully. I know I've said it a million times, but they're not going to be dominant in pass pro, right? They're going to get work back. They're just not as big as these other guys. But for me, Wright just looks like a guy that's we can set a lot of our protections based on knowing Darnell Wright's going to do his job. And I think that's going to be really impactful here moving forward, because you can count on a guy like that. He looks to me like he's living up to his draft slot. I think he looks really good to me.
He had, of course, the phantom hold call. He had a pre-snap penalty, which the Bears had four of them. So I mean, it wasn't a perfect game from him, but I don't think he gave up any. None of the pressures came from Darnell Wright. Wright did a really nice job in both the run and the pass game. Like I've talked about, I think he's on the cusp of Pro Bowl. He's kind of right pushing for that spot this year. And look, Ben Johnson knows what a good right tackle looks like. So I think Darnell Wright's a guy that can push for that. I think he'll kind of be in the mix all season long. The Bears, the NFC has some pretty good tackles. So he may not make it, but he's going to be right there on that cusp. And like I said, if you have one guy on the line, okay, we know right tackle's lock. It kind of helps you as a protection scheme to kind of know what you have to do. So Ben will work around that. And if he has to help Braxton, he knows that that's fine, because the guy on the right side has got it locked down.
You saw that a lot. He had a lot of true pass sets that was just on his own. He was on an island.
Yep.
And the other four guys were working the other way. Right. And so that is what it is. He's going to have those throughout the year because they're going to count on him like that. So the degree of difficulty for him is going to probably be higher than Braxton Jones, because Braxton's probably going to get some help, particularly as he's rounding himself back into form with the injury. Real quick, I want to do the blame pie. We had this last year where I would put this out and kind of try to divvy up the blame for a loss, particularly when it was a collapse. And I thought, well, why not try it out here for this collapse? And so basically the question is, who do you think was most responsible? I put it up on Twitter this morning, ran the poll for 12 hours or something like that. And I was up incredibly early this morning because I had to take my wife to the airport. So I think this went up at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning. The final results were 54% said Caleb was most to blame. 31% said the referees. 6% said Cairo Santos, and 9% put it on coaching /other. I just put if you don't agree with these three top choices, hit that up for me. And wisdom of the crowds, it kind of feels right. I don't think you can deny the bad calls by the referees. I hate it. I hate talking about that's a bad call, and it just sounds so whiny, and it's not very useful. But these were egregious, and they weren't evened out, and they were in big moments. Right. It wasn't just it's first quarter and they called this thing and then it didn't end up in anything. They all resulted in points either on the board for Minnesota or off the board for Chicago. They were huge swings. And, I've talked about the phantom holding call a lot. It was a good rep and it got punished. And I cannot get over that. And so I think that it definitely deserves at least 30% of the blame. I'd probably put it a little higher. And I think on the rewatch, I still think Caleb deserves the most. Those inaccurate passes, those non-competitive passes, I think are tough. They're tough to swallow. There's a couple possessions that are essentially given away because he either lost focus for a minute or just whatever it was, got jittery feet, and Flores got the best of him. If Caleb Williams is going to be the guy that we think he can be and going to take this team, that can't happen, right? Just simply put, that can't happen. So if that's happening in November, December, like we're in trouble, right? I mean, again, September football is what it is. You learn a lot about your team, you learn a lot about your players, what you can and can't do. You're still figuring stuff out, you're still installing, you're still learning, all that kind of stuff. But some of that stuff is okay, noted. Let's move on. If it's still there in a couple months, we're really going to start worrying about this.
Yeah, you talk about the coaching too, and like I said, Ben Johnson talked about today in his press conference. They asked him about him throwing that challenge flag, and he said that he didn't trust the process. He said he should have listened to his guys up top that were in the booth telling him what to do, and he kind of let the guys around him kind of lead him on, and that's why he kind of threw the flag. And he said that he'll learn from that. This is his first game. He had a play, I think it was early on in the game, where he kind of went for it on 4th down, where I'm like, man, that would have been a chip shot field goal. Maybe just take the points there. It's your first game. So there's some moments in the game where I thought that, some of his decisions were what you'd expect from a first-year head coach. And then it kind of circle back to the penalties, 12 penalties in the game.
Yeah,
that's the most penalties the Bears have had since 2021, more than any game in the Flus era, right? So I can just imagine what the Bears were off today. The players weren't there, but I can imagine at the next practice they have, which would be tomorrow, I believe it's going to be it's going to be rough. I mean, they got to shake those pre-snap penalties off. Yep. And look, the beat writers there, they told fans there are some problems, pre-snap issues, so there's some issues here with this, and stop it. You're a hater. That's what happens a lot on social media. And, here they are, 12 penalties. Yeah. And some of those, at least 3 of them were total BS. But there are 4 pre-snap penalties.
The pre-snap stuff is unacceptable.
Unacceptable. And
right.
Ben, he blew his top when he saw that, when he got back in the locker room. He knew that happened.
In general, as an offensive lineman, if you forget the snap count, it's because you are in your head about what you have to do.
Yeah.
You are
thinking.
You're like, okay, they're in this. I'm running this. That means I got to do that. That stuff generally gets, paved out over time, or you lose focus, and that's the mental toughness part where you got to kind of lock in, right? It's week 1. I'm going to assume it's I'm overwhelmed. I'm trying to think about what my assignment is, rather than I'm not locked in. I'm not mentally tough, right? That's the kind of, those are conversations for later. Most offensive linemen are pretty mentally tough. So I'm just putting that out there. A lot of times it's just the confusion on assignment, and you kind of get lost, or your own quarterback draws you off. That happens. That where the cadence surprises even the offensive lineman. You've seen that, or the defense plays some game. Okay, now I'm just listing things that can happen, but I think these were early, growing pains of what am I doing here, and trying to get that figured out. That stuff has to get ironed out. Those are unacceptable. That has to get removed. You don't want to be talking about offensive linemen for those reasons, right? You don't want to have the penalty reasons why you're talking about these guys. All right. Well, we have basically filled up our hour. We have to get out of here because we're doing a double header tonight. If you guys are interested in sticking around on the YouTube, the Mac and Reed show is going to follow us up here just in a couple minutes. So we'd love to see what those guys' take is. For us, we will be back at our normal slot next week, Monday at 6. We will see you all then. Thanks for joining us. And sorry it wasn't a better result, but we're going to try for, get this train back on the tracks here in Detroit. We'll see you next week.